Now you see, if you follow where I'm heading, if you're not bound by the grip of time, where does that take you? To freedom. The practices of detachment, synonymous with the practice of freedom. Catherine came in tonight, said hello, and we hugged a bit, and she said, "How are you?" I neglected to ask her how she was, and that was a mistake on my part. But I asked her, she said, "How are you?" And I said, "Normal." And she said, "Normal good or normal bad?" And excuse me? I'm about to say that. So whenever you ask Colette, "How are you?" she would say normal, even though she was lying on the floor at 4 o'clock in the morning, had stumbled over a chair that a student hadn't put away, or the housekeeper, and she was lying on the floor because she was too weak to get up. We're talking about her being 90 years old or 91 years old. I get her on the phone. "How are you?" "Normal." "Well, what's going on?" She said, "I'm lying on the floor." And I said, "How long?" "I've been here, I guess, for several hours." And I said, "And how do you," and I said, "So you call yourself normal?" And she said, "Yeah, I also have pain in my back." And I said, "Well, you have pain in your back?" And she said, "Yeah, but the pain is not me." And the lying on the floor was met with laughter. She was laughing about the fact that she was lying and couldn't get up. So she was normal. It has to do with detaching from held habits, beliefs, and conditioning that you are experiencing in your life on a thinking level, which are the beliefs that you're holding on to, which are false and have no evidentiary support to confirm them. Beliefs that you've had in place, which came into your being in the first 7 years of your life. And by the time you reach the age of 8, you're a completed human, and all the major belief systems of your life are in place. And then you have your feeling states that you hold on to, and the psychological system of the 20th century reinforced this mistake and this error, in which you've made hay out of your feeling states that are distressing. Depression, guilt, resentment, anxiety, fear, worry, despondency, despair, gloominess, moroseness. We could go sadness, excessive sadness. We can go through a whole bevy of these feeling states, which do nothing but reduce your life force and help to destroy your body. You remove yourself from the lures, the enticements, the intimidations to attach to the value system of a materialistically based world, which has you believe that you're insufficient, that you are not whole, that you're not complete, and that you need things to make you feel whole, happy, contented, sufficient, and completed. The serpent said, you see this tree, this beautiful tree over here with the Rolls Royces and the fur coats and the mansions. You see all that beautiful, enticing stuff and that beautiful fruit that's over there. That's where the necklaces and the diamonds and the rubies. And you see all that stuff. And you're not supposed to eat from that tree because you die. And that's where death gets introduced into the world. That's the spiritual foundational principle of the birth, not only of civilization, but of the birth of the mistake that we make in this world as living human beings, consigned to have to repair the error that we are insufficient, that we are not complete, that we are not whole, and that we need more, and that we need to get things to make us feel at one with ourselves. Major error, glaring error. Bzzz. And when I say normal, and I'm asked how do you feel normal, I know what's going on with myself, and I know that I've extracted myself, or am in the process of extracting myself from the grip of time, because it's the arrow of time that we have to deal with, the past and the future, because the past is over, ended, buried, done, gone, finished, no more existing. I'm talking about your personal past. It's over. There's nothing more that needs to be done. It's finished. So that the future, it doesn't exist. It hasn't happened yet. But the arrow of time that we have been riding on makes us believe that the past and the future are important. And when you feel normal, you feel that you're not bound by the grip of time. Now you see, if you follow where I'm heading, if you're not bound by the grip of time, where does that take you? Where do you think it takes you if you're not gripped by the arrow of time?
Freedom.
Excuse me?
To space of freedom.
To freedom. The practices of detachment are synonymous with the practice of freedom. So when the Israelites leave the exile of Egypt, they go into a place of freedom, and they're told, go through this challenge of the Red Sea, which didn't part. Only when the guy Nachshon entered and he took some steps, and he is about to drown, the sea parts, because his faith is in the direction that he's taking, because he's not concerned with the result. He just goes. He has to go, because freedom is a step toward an actional step of faith towards something. It's an intention, what we call in the Hebraic term is very nice, kavanah, an aim, an intention, a will plus an aim, will plus intention. You just go. You go do. The other side of my card. You go do. So you go do. You go do. A statement in the Talmud said, do it and then you'll know. Do it and then you'll understand. Stop talking about it. Stop talking about the content of consciousness, about your own trials and tribulations. There's nothing new there. The practice of freedom is the practice of detaching from these habituated condition, deceptive, false belief-laden life that we're all taught. And you're moving away from it, because they all have all the beliefs that you've been taught, and all the value system that you've been hanging on to has to do with the future or the past. It has nothing to do with anything that is of truth. But all that we feel is significant for us to be concerned with has to do with the future. Look, everybody's getting so upset about the presidential election, who's going to win this thing, and so on. And all the concerns, of course, the media plays it up because they need to do that to make you feel hopeless. So they want to get you to feel anxious and worried and scared about what's going to become, what's going to happen. What's going to happen when this person gets in or that person gets in? What's going to take place? And then they're starting to play up now. Well, after the election, if this guy loses, there's going to be violence. They're already setting the seed. They're planting the seed. The media is one of those institutions that wants to dominate and control your life and wants to make you a slave to it. So they're talking to you about nonsense. It's all nonsense. So normal means that we're not affected. We're not affected by what others say, think, feel, or do. This is a practice of detachment. I'm not affected by what you say, think, feel, or do. If you are affected by what some say, think, feel, or do, you're a slave. And the purpose and the exquisiteness of the removal from Egypt was the exodus from enslavement. We have to exodus from enslavement. And so when we're not determined by, our mood is not determined by all this other garbage that's coming at us, that's normal. When you're feeling that unaffected by the conditions and the circumstances that are happening around you, and you become a law unto yourself, become your own authority, you're off the arrow of time. We want to get off the arrow of time. So you want to become attuned to in the practices of freedom, to get away from the lures and the temptations that draw us into time. Now that's a work in progress, because it's a commitment to want to start on this way and to take this direction, to live a life that's balanced, harmonic, truthful, loving, peaceful, contented, contributory, harmless, considerate, humane, divinely inspired, and to be what is one of the greatest practices you could ever consider taking on for this normal way of life, gratuitousness. That is to give yourself freely, using your what we call the 5 light currents of will to offset what we've been habituated and conditioned to rely on, which is the 5 dark currents of will. Take, keep, the greed factor. Take, keep, hold on to at the expense of others, advance at the expense of others, and the desire to be great, to usurp the knowledge and power of God. So we want to neutralize that. We want to be gratuitous. So we give freely, and we give, we share, and we need nothing back, and there's no compensation that's required. You don't need anything in return. And I'm giving you the elements of love. How does love trump death? I'm giving you the elements of what it is to live a life that's unconditioned, that's not dependent on the world's response to you. You're all familiar with Irving Berlin, the great American composer. You all heard about the standard songbook, the American songbook. These great composers who contributed to them through the 30s and 40s, 20s, 30s, and 40s: George Gershwin, Cole Porter, Jerome Kern, Arthur Schwartz, Y.P. Harburg, all these different people who contributed to this great standard songbook. And Irving Berlin was one of these major composers. Well, Irving Berlin lived to 100, and in a way I can understand that by what I'm about to say. And he married a Catholic woman. He was a Jew, and he never gave up his ardent interest in Judaism and his practice of Judaism. Never gave it up. He was completely considered himself that, but he married a Catholic woman. Catholic woman's husband, her name was McKay. Her father was extraordinarily wealthy, and they married in the 20s. And as soon as they got married, he disinherited her, completely shunned her, because as a Catholic she married a Jew. That was off base, not to be considered. She went against the creed and so on, did a terrible thing, and was disinherited altogether, disowned. They, of course, at the point became quite a struggling couple. Early on, in the late teens, the 20s, and so on. Irving Berlin, of course, became this giant composer. During the Depression, Mr. McKay lost his money. He had some legal, some financial dealings, some business dealings that went south, and he was completely bankrupt. Irving Berlin bailed him out without any need. There was no interest to be paid back. There was nothing to be needed in return. Nothing. Nothing needed to come back to him. He bailed the man out. Now, if you look at that in a certain way, after all, this man did something that was injurious, apparently, to his daughter and her husband, and he held no, what we call, accounts receivable. There was no grudge, no accounts receivable, no ledger book that he was holding an account that you owe me, you have to pay me back, you have to give me back because you did something egregious to me, which I hold you accountable for. That's called anger. So you can look at yourself and see if you're holding accounts receivable against someone or some others in your life. If you're holding it against yourself, we call it accounts payable. So that ledger book also doesn't get paid off, because there's never enough you can do for somebody else, because you think that you must go to some excess to give that person as much as you can, so that person could be feeling comfortable, like you, or come to love you, or whatever. And so these are impossible accounts as it stands until you take charge of yourself and you begin to take stock of this practice of freedom to close the ledger books. So the accounts payable, of course, is where you feel you have to give back so much, or you have to do so much for somebody, or to take care, make sure that they're safe and protected and so on, sometimes called smother love. So what you're doing is you're lying down on the altar of the needs of another, most often the times irrationally, neurotically, dysfunctionally. You're lying down on on the altar of somebody else's needs. Could be a family member, in which you sacrifice yourself to the needs of another. We call that idolatry. Just like being determined by what somebody else says, does, thinks, or feels. You're lying down, you're now a slave again. So what happened with Irving Berlin was, when he became famous, he wrote 2 songs. I don't know which they were. And I don't know if they were White Christmas and Easter Parade, because he gave these songs to his wife in perpetuity. So he gave these 2 songs to her and said, this is in perpetuity. I want nothing back, but in case anything should happen to our marriage, these are yours, so you can always be sure of having an income. Then he wrote the song, I believe the song he wrote, because he's quite a patriotic American, and he wrote the song Over There, which became a gigantic hit. He donated it to the American veterans. He gave the song to the Veterans Affairs Committee of the American government, for the purposes of any royalty, anytime that song is played, the royalties from that song goes to the care of the veterans of the wars. He was acting gratuitously. We can do it very easily. You meet somebody on the street who's down and out, and you give him money. You press and Colette said, I said to Colette, I've been, these different countries like Morocco, and there's so many beggars, and so on. She said yes. She grew up in North Africa, in Algeria, and she said, what you do is you press a coin into their hand. Why? Because you remember them, because they're anonymous. Nobody knows them or remembers them. They're not seen. And so you remember. It doesn't matter what you give, you remember. You're remembering them as human beings who are sharing the planet with you. So you give gratuitously, and you don't need anything in return. And many ways that gratuitousness can take place, because God created us gratuitously. It's a gratuitous act to put us on this earth and give us the seed of life, so that we could make our way back, to find our way back and repair the error of Eden, and come back to our source and become one and unified and with our spiritual father and mother. These are steps to take in your own development, but you're seeking to get off the arrow of time, and in each way that it takes place. Well, the major one that I found out through a great teacher of mine named Robert Rondell Gibson was the point that he made, that the centerpiece, the common denominator of everything that happens in your life, in which you're finding to be suffering on any level, physical, emotional, mental, social, moral, any level, or any combination of them that you're finding difficulties with, and finding yourself feeling some sort of misery, suffering, pain, disturbance, discomfort, which are all indicators, as the hidden teachers, that you're going to an excess, you're going out of balance, you have become inebriated, you become drunk, you moved away from the center, you have gone astray, you've gone too far, you have lost your balance, you've lost your way. And he said that the common denominator is the emergency state, the false emergency state. The emergency state is a common physiological function of all human beings, in which when a threat happens to you and it comes at you, you either respond with fight or flight. So you either got to flee or you got to fight. And it's always about the future. This happens in your own personal life, in your thinking, because you're thinking in future talk, you're talking in future talk, you're talking in ways that are not normal. They're natural, but they're not normal. It's not normal to talk about the future. I'm sorry, but it's not normal. It's natural, because you'll hear almost 100% of the conversations that you engage in, or that you are overhearing somebody talk in a restaurant, in your home, or someone, or your friend calls and wants to talk to you about something. It's got to be about the future and how terrible I feel, and this thing happened, and my husband did this, or my wife did this, and it's going to be about the future or the past. It's not going to be about now. Not going to be about now. Practice of freedom. You want to get yourself off the arrow of time, because when you get involved in the emergency state like this, your body is beginning to disintegrate. Because I mentioned that the system that I'm talking to you about is a holistic system, WHOL. It's an integrated system, physical, emotional, mental, social, moral. So things that are happening on one level are being reflected in these other levels. It's all happening together. Don't believe for a moment that your body is not responding to the anxiety or the worry or whatever else is going on with you, or the mental confusion or disorientation, and so on, the mental lapses or the social disturbances from which everything is coming. Actually, it's all in the social sphere. And don't believe for a moment your physiology isn't responding to that. We know it is, and there are research studies, many research studies, to show that. So you want to practice these ways of detachment, to step away. Gratuitousness is stepping away. God created us and stepped away. And said, I leave it to you with free will and choice to do what you can to find your way back to me in this exilic world that I put you into, in which you're going to face these tasks and challenges and thorns and slings and arrows and thistles and barbs and things like that. You're going to face all of this stuff. I put you here to see what you do. So you are going to be made, as we're made in the image and likeness of God. We're stepping away. We're made in that image and that likeness to emulate that. So we step away. We detach. You know, as Buddha said, the source of all suffering is attachment. We step away from what we're holding on to, what we think is going to save our lives, the material things that we're grasping at and hoarding and collecting as though it's going to be the determiner of our life or death. No, it's not. It's going to probably be the determiner of our death, because it's all connected with being attached to the future. Practice of freedom. You want to practice for the second practice in the spiritual process. And as you detach, you become attached to the vertical reality, to the source. That you find yourself becoming more connected to a holy life, to a life of purity and cleansing and being in order and coming into order, and you find yourself coming into a world that you are connected to the source and feeling and making an alliance with that invisible reality. You're doing that. It all happens automatically, naturally. So we want to take the step of practicing the detachment. You want to get off the arrow of time. It is not to your benefit to be riding this arrow